Grade breakdown. This is after extra credit was put into Blackboard. So we had one person who, with extra credit, got above 100. 9 people who were in the A range, 90 to 100. 2 people, 80 to 89. 2 people, 60 to 69. 3 people, 50 to 59. 2 people, 40 to 49. And then 3 people down here pretty low. So I would say these 3 folks, you want to really consider why you did poorly on the exam. Did you do? Did you get grades that low because you didn't prepare for it, because you haven't put the effort in the first semester, or did you get grades that low because you just suck at this? Okay? And that's okay. I want you to follow your passion area, and if computer science just isn't for you, then most of us are freshmen or sophomore in here, so now's the time to bail. and go and pick something else. So, really decide why it is you did poorly. If it's because you've been lazy, well, then fix it. Remember, you have the second half of the semester, and I have the policy where you can, if you do better in the final exam, I'll replace your midterm with your final. So even if you got let's see, I want to say like the lowest grade was like a 14 or something like that. So, if that was you could still get 100 in it by doing better in the last one. But do have a coming to Jesus moment and consider what the problem was.
Slightly off topic, how and when first is the sign up for hackathon?
All that goes to Professor Josh Locklear. So it's joshua.locklear@cu.edu. Just email him.
Okay.
And I would say as soon as possible, because they're going to be making arrangements for like food and all that stuff. And then remember, there's same thing if you're going to do the boot camp on the 4th.
Boot camp is you.
Yeah, boot camp's me, and I'm going to be basically running the hackathon.
Okay.
He's the administration, I'm the programming
Okay.
thing. So
do
we have extra points?
everything goes through him for signups.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just teach it.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I'm not very good with keeping lists.
The boot camp you said was on a Tuesday at 6?
Tuesday at 6 p.m. In here. I'll be recording it too, so if for some reason you can't make it, I'll put the video up, but it'll be 2 hours of kind of intro to Android programming. Just enough to kind of have a clue what's going on. And we'll also connect that to a database. We're going to be connecting it to Firebase, which is Google's real-time database. And then we'll have 2 hours of iOS development, kind of the exact same kind of simple, stupid little app that happens to store something on a database, just to get the basics. You're not going to leave that thing knowing how to be a mobile developer, but you'll have enough knowledge to kind of understand the tools so that when you go into a group at the actual hackathon, you'll A, have all the right software installed, and B, you'll be able to kind of follow along. You won't be having to learn, like, what the heck am I looking at the same time as you're also trying to learn some legitimate skills because I've made the mention in here that programming is programming. So, when you start seeing people writing Android apps or iPhone apps in this 12-hour hackathon, you're going to see variable declarations and if statements and for loops. That's a majority of what you're going to see, things that are going to be familiar to you. Okay, but then you're going to see them dragging buttons onto the screen and that kind of stuff, and then writing functions that what happens when we click this button. So kind of getting your mind wrapped around where all that stuff fits in the that world, I think will be helpful. So whether you attend the boot camp or you watch the video beforehand, I think that would be a good idea. But I definitely encourage all of you to go to the actual hackathon. We've done these for years here, but I also have students. We travel to hackathons as well. Typically, those are in the fall, but we've gone all over the country to go to these different hackathons, just like sports teams go and do stuff. And you can talk to any students who have been to those. I think far more learning happens in that 24-hour period of these hackathons than in a whole semester in a class. I think it's pretty. You're making a mistake if you don't take advantage of them.
Yeah.
Is kind of the punchline.
Still in the ward?
Well, the one that's on April 8th is here.
Oh,
Yeah, here. That's ours.
Oh.
Yep, and we do a mini one down in Ward 4 downtown. That's more just one that's every 6 months. It's not or every 3 months. That's like a mini one. The ones that we've traveled around for is this one called Battle Hack, which is put on by, it used to be a PayPal company called Braintree, and that one's pretty cool. There's some funny pictures out there. We were featured at the one in Raleigh, North Carolina, a couple years ago. We had, I think we had 22 students that basically carpooled across the country.
How about that drive?
Yeah, well, it's a 14-hour drive.
I've done it through Michigan. And
You tried doing it after you were just up for 24 hours programming.
I wasn't the driver. I was the passenger.
I actually have a video somewhere. I mean, I flew, so yeah. But all the students drove. But we have there's a video that one of the teams was driving behind, and it wasn't one of our people, but they were driving behind some car where I'm guessing the guy was either drunk or fell asleep at the wheel. So this is like 4 a.m. They're driving behind this guy, and all of a sudden he goes off the road and like ramps the ditch
Oh my God.
and hits a tree. The guy was fine. Okay, you know, he got out, and he was mad that students pulled over to see what's going on. You know, they called 911. Obviously, accident, send help, right?
Yep.
He was mad that he called the police. This guy probably had some outstanding warrants or something. I don't know, but.
Probably a little over point.
But I got a video from the guys that show all this like police presence there at 4 a.m. It's like everything's fine. We're heading to Raleigh. So it's kind of a funny thing. All right. So in any case, I would say that certainly if you're in these folks up here, the 11 people that cleared 12 people that cleared an 80, I would say you're doing well. That's ahead of where you probably should be. That means you had some good competence there. You showed me what you could do. So I would say, you're doing well with that. If you're in this group here, this is the suspicious group, right? Between the 40 and the 69 number, those numbers mean different things, right? Depends on what kind of stuff you missed on the exam. Some of those folks, a majority of what they missed was like the conversion questions or like the very first question, things that really had nothing to do with program. They should have been easy points. Others, they kind of just sporadically missed half of every question. So, kind of take a look at what you missed and, again, have that conversation with yourself of, why did I do poorly in this? And what could I do differently next time? A couple people, showed up late for the exam, so, they didn't have the full time to take the exam, so that's obviously going to impact your grade. But in any case, I would say the major concern would be these folks down here. Just be honest with yourself. Is computer science not for you, or have you just been lazy and not keeping up with the work and that kind of stuff, right? And then, or did you not prepare for the exam? Was it completely off your radar? And if that's the case, like I said, you can fix it. So just be honest with yourself and determine why you did poorly, and then either drop the class or do better in the second 8 weeks. Okay, so let's kind of go through the exam. And I'll point it out when we get there, but there was one question that what I intended to be testing you on actually wasn't what I actually ended up testing you on. So I actually gave points for any sort of reasonable answer for that one. And I'll point it out. All right. So I'll type some of the stuff. Some of it I'll just read. All right, so question 1. This is 200, okay. What does it mean for Python to be loosely typed and interpreted? Okay, one common mistake here is you only answered one of those two. Either told me why it's loosely, what it means to be loosely typed, or what it means to be interpreted. You didn't tell me the other part of that. Okay, so the loosely typed part of this means that you do not have to provide the type of value that a variable is built to hold, right? Okay, which then has the side effect, and as long as you kind of gave me that, you don't have to define the type for the of what kind of value a variable is built to hold. That was kind of good enough. But, you know, another thing some people would say is then that leads to it being a relatively slow language because you have to have that whole type inference engine that has to figure out what lives inside of a variable before you actually can do stuff with it. You know, like with the plus sign only works for certain kinds of values, that kind of stuff. So we got to peek inside first. So that was kind of the first half of that question. Second half, what it means for it to be interpreted, okay, as opposed to a compiled language. Remember, compiled languages are languages that run through the compiler. There's a translation from a high-level language to a low-level language prior to runtime. An interpreted language is interpreted in real time during runtime. While the program's actually executing, it's being interpreted on the fly. So again, this leads to it being a relatively slow programming language. That makes sense? So something along those lines is kind of what I was looking for. That one should have been mostly free points. All right, next one, convert. What is it? 1001101 from binary to decimal. All right, so I'm going to work from the right to the left. So we have 1 times the ones place plus 0 times the twos place. So this is ones place, twos place, 4s, 8s, 16s, 32s. So plus 1 times the 4s place plus 1 times the 8s place plus 1 times the 16s place plus 0 times the 32s place plus 0 times the 64s place plus 1 times the 128s place. So which is 1 plus 4 plus 8 plus 16 plus 128. Is that like 157? 157. Okay, so that's that question. Questions about that one? Okay, so again, that should have been, relatively free points. I mean, if you made a little math mistake in there, I tried to give you some of the credit. And by the way, if you think I screwed you over for points after class, just come up and I'll take a peek at it and I'll give you some points back if you deserve it. Or if you think I gave you too many points, let me know. I can. I'm sure I'm going to have a nice long line for that one, right? Redistribute points, right? Yeah, you usually don't have long lines for people who think I gave them too many points. Yeah, it's not a common occurrence. All right, so, but again, I guaranteed there'd be conversion questions, so that one shouldn't have been missed, right? So, if you miss that one, that's just bad preparation or whatever. I mean, if you made a little math mistake, as long as you showed me your work, I was able to give you either most of the credit or something like that. If you just gave me the wrong number, no work, well, you didn't give me any options. So, I guess do better next time. All right, next one, convert 1328 from decimal to hex. 1328 decimal to hex. All right. So this is the one where we divide by 16 over and over again, right? To get us the answer. So 1328 divided by 16 gives us what? That is what we're doing here. Decimal to hex, correct? Okay. So 1328 divided by 16 gives me 83. With what remainder? 83 times 16, so it gives me a remainder of 0, right? 83 divided by 16 is 5. 5 times 16 is 80 with remainder. That's your remainder 3. He was a step ahead of us. 5 divided by 16 16 goes into 5 0 times. 0 times 16 is 0 with remainder 5. Then we read our answer from bottom up, so this is 530. The hexadecimal version of 1328 decimal. Questions about that one? Okay. Next one, write the necessary code to display all of the odd numbers between 1 and 100,000 to the screen. All right, so let's well, we'll do it in here just so we have it shared. Start off with that for a second. All right, so all the odd numbers between 1 and 100,000 to the screen. So this could be for I in range 1, comma, 100,000, step by 2. Tab here. There we go. We'll do 2 tabs. And then we'll just say print out I. So this is supposed to be odd numbers, right? All the odd numbers. So we'll start at 1, go all the way up to, but not including 100,000. If you said 100,001 here, that's not incorrect. But it wouldn't change the numbers that you actually printed out because we're stepping by 2. So this will go from 1 to 3 to 5 to 7, so on and so forth. Each time through, we'll print out the current value of I. Now, if you didn't want to do the step thing, you can similarly write it with a conditional. So we're going to check all the numbers between 1 and 100,000 inclusive. That's why we went to 100,001. Each time through, we're going to ask a question. We're going to say, if I mod 2 is equal to 1. If that's a true statement, then we'll print out I. So either one of those is a reasonable solution. You could have also said not equal to 0 here. So this says I when divided by 2. If it has a remainder, that means it's an odd number. That's the definition of an odd number, right? Something that's not evenly divisible by 2. All right, questions on that one? Something along those lines. Next one. What does the following function do? Give an example of sample input and output. All right, so this one is a function called do something, and it's taking in, I tried to give it a variable that had a meaningful name, something called LST, so right off the bat we should probably think it's probably a list. Okay, and so as long as the length of the list is greater than 0, so as long as I have some stuff in the list, I'm going to do some asking. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and create a variable called blah, and I'm going to set it equal to the very first value that was in the list, the value at bucket 0 in the list. Now I'm going to go through all the rest of the values in the list. So that for loop starts at 1. Remember, lists start at bucket 0 to length minus 1. So I'm going to start at bucket 1, all the rest of the values in there, all the way up to the length of the list minus 1, so not inclusive. So I'm going to check the rest of the buckets in the list. Each time through, I'm going to ask if the current value I'm looking at is greater than the current value stored in blah, replace blah with the current value. In the end, I'm returning the value of blah. Notice that return blah is not part of the for loop, so it happens after the for loop is completed. So what does this code do? It returns the largest value in the list. Okay, probably a numeric values. So largest number in the list. So if you had the list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it would return the 5. That make sense? All right, so that's what that one did. One thing that did surprise me, I remember this on a couple of exams, there were several people that showed that they could write code, but that they couldn't read it, which is very odd. Pretty commonly what ends up happening is beginning programmers feel comfortable looking at code and telling you what it does significantly ahead of writing it themselves. So yeah, that was a strange thing. So if that was you, I guess I might just ask yourself why that is. Is that a common occurrence, or just was your mind working funny that day? That's really, really strange. Because it's pretty common when we show up to class, you maybe struggled on the homework assignment, right? And then you see me write the code. And like, oh, that was it? Or, you know, it made sense when I wrote it. But you're like, okay, well, I'm not sure I could write that on my own yet. That's normal. That's kind of where many of you should be right now. Okay, so when I was looking at this, that's kind of why when I showed you the breakdown of the grades, I'm not concerned with those 40s, 50s, and 60s, really. Okay, because especially if a majority of the points you lost were from the programming questions. You know, that's almost kind of like maybe you're dragging a little bit behind the average, but that's kind of where a lot of you should be. You know, like programming's that sport. So, you know, you're that kid that's not great at soccer yet, you know, but that doesn't mean you don't have the potential to get good. You just haven't practiced enough yet. What are you going to say?
Yeah, I sometimes like I can't figure out why, so I just run debugging on it, and then like I can monitor the values in the memory and see how they change, and then I can fix them later. But like reading it, like just that, I can't. I don't know what.
You have trouble reading it, really?
Yeah, I go debugging it and watching the memory and all the values.
Really? But you don't know why. That is strange, dude. I mean, that's stranger than your last name. Yeah, I wonder why. I wonder, actually, if I remember correctly, on yours, you have like a little note out to the side of each and every line.
Yeah,
Is that right?
To write them down.
Yeah. So, yeah, I wonder if you're almost getting like what's the saying? You know, you're missing the trees for the forest or something like that. Is that the saying? You know, like you're getting so specific about each individual line that you're not connecting them all together, realizing that
break them down one by one.
Right, but it's almost like you're not putting it back together in the end. Like you know what each individual line does, but you can't look at the 8 lines and say, okay, well, as a whole, this is what it actually accomplished. Like you struggled with that. So I don't know. It was definitely weird though. Yeah, that is a weird thing. So I don't know.
It works, but it takes time.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean it's interesting. It is. So I don't know. Maybe explore that a little bit, or you know, we can sit down and walk through some code. I can kind of figure out how your mind is working, because that is strange. You know, if you think about it like a sport, you could watch like a skilled soccer player teach you something, and you understand what they're doing, right? That doesn't mean you can repeat it. So that's completely common in real life when you think about learning sports. You could watch somebody who's good at something, you could appreciate that they're good at it, and you can say, oh, well, he put the side spin on it, and that made the thing curve into the net or whatever, or something like that. That doesn't mean you can accomplish that on your own yet. So that's kind of the normal occurrence of things, not just in programming, just in, I guess, the world. But I guess he gets good at stuff before he can appreciate others. It's like, look, I don't want to look at you teach me soccer. I'm just already good. All right. I got this. All right, number 6, write the necessary code to fill a list up with the even numbers between 1 and 100,000. Okay, so this one is similar to number 4, except instead of printing out the values, we're adding them to a list. Okay, so we'll kind of steal some of this code. So these are going to be the even numbers. So what we'll do is we'll start off at 0. We'll go to 100,001. That way we stop at 100,000. We'll step by 2. So this should step us through our even numbers, all right? But instead of printing it, we need to add it to a list. So let's just give ourselves an empty list here. And then we'll say lst.append. And the value we're going to append is the current value I. Okay. Similarly, we can write something similar to what we have above there. If you didn't want to do the step by 2 thing, we could ask the question, if I mod 2 is equal to 0, so if I, when divided by 2, has a remainder of 0, it goes into 2 goes into it evenly, then append it to the list. All right, so both of these do the same thing. Questions on that one? Okay. Write a function that takes a string as a parameter and returns the string in reverse. Just gonna steal this guy here. Okay, so this one we're writing a function, not just writing some lines of code. So we're writing a function that has a name that takes an input. So we'll say def. Let's call this reverse. This will take a string as a parameter, so maybe we call this guy S. Okay. Now some of you use the built-in reverse function and then returned it. That really wasn't what I was going for, but I gave you credit for it. So I'm going to write it the way that I intended for you to write this. I wanted you to show me you can write a loop to go through the elements of a string. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we want to walk the string backwards. Okay, so we can build up a new string. So maybe we have an answer that's going to start off as the empty string. Then we're going to say for I in. Have we been doing the opening parenthesis for I or not? What have I been using in my examples most of the time?
4 has not had parentheses.
Okay. They both work, but I just want to stay consistent with my examples. So we'll say for I in, we want to start at the last legal bucket in our string, which is the length of the string minus 1. Okay? So this is going to be range lens minus 1 down to, but we wanted to include the 0. So down to -1, step by -1. Okay? So this is going to take I on a voyage through our string backwards from the last legal bucket of our string all the way up to and including bucket 0, not including that -1. That's why we went to the -1 because this is non-inclusive. Each time through, we want to take the current character we're looking at, so our string S at position I, and we want to concatenate it onto answer. So we'll say answer is equal to answer concatenated with S at bucket I. Oh, is there no? There we go. And then we'll return answer. Notice an answer is not indented under the for loop, so that guy is not part of the for loop. So after the for loop has run to completion, then we'll return answer. Okay? Now, commonly missed thing with these, this is an untapped resource, as we said in class. Here's a function called reverse that takes some string as a parameter. So I can come down here and I can call this function a couple different times. Okay, so I can say, well, we'll do a print on it. So I can say print reverse of hello, and it's going to call our reverse function, passing hello in for S, and then doing all this logic, giving me hello backwards. I can then say print reverse of elephant. And again, it will, missing some parentheses here. Again, it'll print out, elephant will go in for S, and it'll print out elephant, return elephant backwards, and then I'm printing it. Does that make sense? So functions are generic. They're untapped resources. We write them with the idea of whatever the parameters are in mind. We don't know what kind of value S will hold when somebody calls it. We just know how long it is. The length of S is the length of S. That'll be 5 for hello. It'll be 8 for elephant. That make sense? All right, so questions on that one. Let's see, that was 7, right? All right, number 8. What does the following function do? Give an example of the sample output. All right, so it's called do something else. Takes a value as a parameter named S. We start A off at 0. Now, this was the question that I intended to test something different. But the way I wrote it, it actually doesn't work for that test. It works. The code works for the assumption many of you made. But S is a string. So I named it S, and that kind of maybe leads you to think it's probably a string. We have a variable named A. We're starting it off at 0. That guy's going to be a sum. We're summing up some values in this. So we say for I in range 0 to length of S. So we're going through all of the legal buckets of S. Okay? So that's 0 to length minus 1 of S. Each time through, I'm saying A is equal to A plus. I'm using a plus sign, which should clue us in that this is either going to be addition or it's going to be concatenation, right? Now, or it's going to be an error. Now, we can assume it's either an error or addition in this case because A is equal to 0. So we know what's on the left-hand side of that plus sign is an integer. So this must be addition. So I'm adding to A the integer version of whatever's in the current bucket of S. Okay, so if S was the string 1, 2, 3, I'm adding onto A a 1, then I'm adding onto a 1 a 2, then I'm adding onto, which is 3, then I'm adding onto the 3 another 3, which would then give me a 6. So I'm returning in the end the final value of A, which is the sum of all the numbers that were contained inside of the string. That make sense? All right, so that's what this code actually does. Anybody want to take a guess at what I was trying to test you on? Pretty close to that. Let's say you took in the string hello instead of a string containing only numbers. What I intended to do was take the integer version of like the H, the integer version of the E, the L, the O. And what would you expect to get from the integer version of an H? I'm not asking for the exact number. What kind of value would you expect to get from the integer version? Go ahead. Yeah, Unicode in modern languages, but same. It'll be ASCII too. Unicode's a superset of ASCII, so the first 256 are the same. So H would be the same in Unicode or ASCII. So I was expecting this to give me the Unicode number, that mapping, right? So H has some number associated with it in the Unicode character set. I was expecting this to give me that number. So this would then add up all of the Unicode or the ASCII values for all the letters in the letters or numbers, all the characters that were in the string. Okay, but it just so happens that the int function doesn't convert a char to its Unicode value, which surprised me, but it doesn't. So if you try to pass an H to the int constructor, the thing that our kind of little converter tool, it will not give you the Unicode value. I'm sure there's a way to get the Unicode value. We can look it up real quick, but that's not the way. All right, so if you gave me any answer that was reasonable based on what the code did, most of you kind of assumed it had numbers in it, and if you take the int version of a character that is a number, that works. That gives you an actual number, and you can sum them all up. Okay, but my intention was the Unicode ASCII conversion thingamajig. So any reasonable answer there was fine, but effectively it sums up the numeric version of all the characters in the string. That's what it does. Whatever that numeric version might be. The code just happens to only work on strings filled with numbers. Okay, 9, write a function that takes 2 integers and returns the larger of 2 integers. Okay, this guy should have been nice and easy. And it unfortunately wasn't for some people. Did I tell you what to call it? Nope. Let's call it larger. It's going to take in an A and a B, 2 values. If A is greater than B, return A. Else, return B. So this guy is a function called larger, takes 2 values, A and B. If A is the bigger number, return it. Otherwise, B must be the bigger number, or they're equal. Then it didn't matter which one you returned. Does that make sense? Very last one. What does the following function do? Do something else. Takes S1 and S2, probably 2 strings. At least that's our suspicion initially. If the length of the first string is greater than the length of the second string, we're going to return the 2 strings concatenated together with the larger string first. So if it was hello and LOL, this will return hello LOL glued together. Otherwise, return this will always return 2 strings glued together with the larger of the 2 strings first. That's what it returns. If you happen to assume this took in numbers, this will return, I guess that's kind of a, well, actually this would not work for numbers because length does not work for numbers. So this is 2 strings. Questions, comments, concerns, bribes? All right, have a good break. If you have any questions about the grading of the exam, come up real quick and I'll take a peek.
So you're gonna go over these then?
Yeah, they're all recorded and all that stuff. And if you want to go on to Blackboard and just confirm that I added in any extra credit that you deserved correctly, go ahead and do that. It should be a different number than you have on there if you did attend any of the extra credit stuff.
I do have a couple questions.
Get this